My entitled brother banned my husband from Thanksgiving, called him a dirty cleaner, and is now threatening to sue us over a family business dispute. I'm a 28-year-old woman married to my wonderful husband, Nick, who's 30. This year's Thanksgiving dinner was hosted by my older brother Brandon, who's 2 years older than me. What started as a hopeful family gathering quickly turned into a chaotic mess that's now reshaping our family dynamics. Brandon and I used to be close growing up. But ever since I started dating Nick 4 years ago, our relationship has deteriorated. Brandon has never approved of Nick, not because of who Nick is as a person, but because of his background. Nick grew up in a modest household raised by a single mother who worked tirelessly to provide for him. Despite the challenges, Nick graduated college and now has a good job while supporting his retired mom. I admire him immensely, but Brandon sees him as inferior because he doesn't come from a wealthy family like ours. This year, Brandon offered to host Thanksgiving, a task usually handled by our parents. He claimed he wanted to host because his wife is pregnant and it would be easier for her. Despite our rocky relationship, Brandon specifically invited both Nick and me, which I took as a sign he might finally be trying to make amends. Excited by the possibility of improving family ties, Nick and I showed up on Thanksgiving Day. As soon as we arrived, Brandon greeted me at the door with a forced smile but told Nick he needed to leave. "You can come in," Brandon said to me, "but Nick needs to go home." I was stunned. "What are you talking about?" Brandon explained that at the last minute, he and his wife had invited her extended family, a group of wealthy, elitist snobs. Brandon claimed it would be embarrassing to introduce Nick to them. I was furious. "Are you seriously turning him away at the door after inviting us?" I demanded. Brandon shrugged. "You knew this wasn't going to work. He doesn't belong here." I started yelling at him, calling him out for his lack of class. Brandon, clearly agitated, snapped back. "Then you can leave too. Take your dirty, illiterate cleaner husband with you." Nick had worked as a janitor during college to pay off student loans, a job he's proud of. Brandon's words were cruel and baseless, and I wasn't going to let them slide. I cursed at him, and things escalated quickly. My parents, hearing the commotion, came outside and tried to calm everyone down. They asked Nick to take me home and promised they would handle Brandon later. At home, Nick helped me calm down, but I was still seething. Blocking Brandon on every platform felt like the only way to move forward. I was disappointed with my parents for not confronting Brandon more forcefully at the moment, but I knew they had guests to consider. The next morning, my parents called, asking me to meet them at my dad's office. When Nick and I arrived, they presented me with a stack of legal documents. To my surprise, it was paperwork to transfer ownership of their law firm to me. As I skimmed through the documents, it became clear my parents wanted to transfer ownership of their law firm to me. This came as a complete shock. Brandon had been working at the firm for years under my father, fully expecting to inherit it when my parents retired. I looked up at my dad, confused. "Are you serious? What about Brandon?" My dad's expression hardened. "After what happened last night, we've decided Brandon isn't fit to inherit the firm." He and his wife showed no remorse for their behavior, even after we confronted them. "They refused to apologize to you and Nick, and that's unacceptable. We're done with him." My mom chimed in, her voice steady. "We want the firm to stay in the family, and you're our only other option. You might not be a practicing lawyer anymore, but you're still qualified. We trust you more than we'll ever trust Brandon." The weight of their decision sank in. While I appreciated their faith in me, I wasn't sure if I could accept. I had left law years ago because I didn't enjoy it. Running the firm would mean giving up my bakery, a business I had built from scratch and truly loved. After reviewing the documents, I pulled Nick aside to talk in private. "What do you think?" I asked. "Should I do this?" Nick hesitated. "It's a big decision. You've worked so hard to build your bakery, and I know how much you love it. But this is a huge opportunity. Whatever you choose, I'll support you." His words reassured me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that taking over the firm was more about getting back at Brandon than anything else. Still, the thought of Brandon inheriting the firm after what he had done made me sick. In the end, I signed the documents. My parents were overjoyed, and we agreed to start the transition process immediately. A week later, my parents announced at the office that I would be taking over. The room fell silent as everyone processed the news. Brandon, who had been avoiding my parents since Thanksgiving, was present and looked utterly blindsided. He didn't say anything at the time, but I could feel the tension radiating off him. Later that evening, he called me from a burner phone. His tone was furious. "You're doing this just to spite me," he accused. "You've always been jealous of me, and now you're stealing my future." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Brandon, this was Mom and Dad's decision. You brought this on yourself." He didn't want to hear it. "You're a petty, selfish liar," he spat. "You don't even want to run the firm, and everyone knows it. You're just doing this to ruin me." His words stung, but I refused to let him intimidate me. "If you don't like it, quit," I said. "No one's forcing you to stay." Brandon screamed something unintelligible before hanging up. Over the next few days, doubt began to creep in. I had never wanted to run the firm. My passion lay in my bakery, and the thought of giving it up filled me with dread. I confided in Nick again, and he reminded me that I didn't have to do anything I didn't want to. "If running the firm doesn't make you happy, don't do it," he said. His words gave me the courage to talk to my parents. I invited them over for dinner and laid everything out. "I don't want to take over the firm," I said. "I signed the papers without thinking it through, and I'm sorry." They were disappointed, but understanding. "We just want the firm to stay in the family," my dad said. "If you don't want it, we'll have to figure something else out." After weeks of discussions, my parents decided to name one of their most trusted employees as the new successor. He had been with the firm for over 15 years and was practically family. While my parents were initially hesitant to pass the firm to someone outside the family, they eventually agreed it was the best option. Brandon, meanwhile, emailed his resignation and announced he was starting his own law firm with financial backing from his in-laws. He made sure to gloat about it, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Nick and I have moved on from the drama, focusing on our life together and my growing bakery business. While it's bittersweet to see how far Brandon and I have drifted apart, I know I made the right decision. The relationship I share with my parents has strengthened, and they've expressed pride in how I handled everything. As for Brandon, he's no longer a part of my life, and I'm finally at peace with that. At the end of the day, I know where my priorities lie, with Nick, my happiness, and the life we've built together. Family isn't always about blood. It's about the people who respect and support you no matter what.